Hey guys, and welcome to the wrap up. If you haven't been here before, this is the official Raptors Republic live post game show where we recap, we dissect, and we have some fun talking about the latest Raptors game. You're going to see the best tweets, the moments, the highlights all flowing across the screen throughout the show. I'm your co host, Sahal Abdi, and tonight, as always, we have my great co host here with me, Oren Weisfeld. Before we actually get started, we want to thank our sponsor, Arif Qureshi from Remax, for supporting the show. Arif specializes in investments, rentals, luxury homes, and so much more. His details are going to be at the bottom of the screen. And if you all could like, comment, and hopefully subscribe to the Raptors Republic channel, turn on those post notifications if you haven't already. It is much appreciated. Oren, this was a good game. Like, I enjoyed the hell out of it. The Raptors came up with a gritty win in Tampa at home versus the Philadelphia 76ers, 110-103. Immediate thoughts on the game, how it ended. I personally loved it to finally see the Toronto Raptors close out an enjoyable, entertaining game.
Yeah, man, really enjoyable game. Pretty high level basketball, I thought, from
Yeah.
both teams. I think we did poke a little hole in Philly's whole championship. This team, I don't know, maybe they're a little fraudulent. We'll see next game. Then after next game, we can really call them frauds. But
Sure.
the Raptors, it just feels like they're in the midst of a run right now. And it feels like it could just keep going the way that they're playing and the way that they're figuring out a lot of stuff. Even tonight you look at, we said the margin for error of this team was tiny and it is smaller, but Powell barely played in the second half. He
Yeah.
didn't have a very good game. And the Raps still found a way to win, by a pretty significant margin, I would say. So that's encouraging for sure. If you're thinking margin of error wise, the Raptors are just they have two stars in Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get into Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. Actually, I want to get into Fred VanVleet right away, who I personally thought was one of the better players on the court for Toronto. He absolutely turned up in the first quarter. And you see that pretty often with Fred, where it's just like kind of just follow my lead, see where this goes in the first quarter. He had a crazy, wild shot clock, 3-point buzzer beating shot. Like I had absolutely no clue how he got that in. He was shooting almost all threes in the first quarter. He finished with 13. Did you like how Fred kind of continued his game and how he was kind of – I usually don't like it as much, Oren, when Fred's kind of a little too passive offensively, because I feel like at this point with the Raptors, especially with Kyle Lowry out, they kind of rely on him to be that guy a lot of the times, as well as Pascal Siakam. Did you like Fred's game? Did you like how he was a little more passive at the end, was giving it up to Pascal, letting Bembry have a lot of those playmaking duties? And then we're going to get into, obviously, Chris Boucher later in the game.
Yeah. No, yeah, I thought Fred did a good job of taking I guess his moments when they came to him.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's moments where he just goes, all right, the offense is in a little bit of a rut, let me create something. Sometimes that goes well, sometimes not, but at least the effort is there. Like at least he has that like scoring like mentality in him, and that's I think important. And you'll see, like, I remember there was one transition layup he had when the Raptors were just in a rut and he just said, fuck it, I'm gonna take it, and just ran the length of the court and laid it up.
Yeah.
And I also want to touch on him defensively because I'm
Mhm.
looking at the box score and it said he had one steal. That's a lie. Like the
Big
way
time.
he's okay. Like Jack was saying the other day that he has some of the quickest hands in the league. I think I agree. He's so good at coming over to double the big man and dig, and like that's hands really more than anything. But what you need to pay attention to is like being the man who doubles is a hard thing, because after that all the rotations are screwed up and it's your job more than anyone else's to find the open man created from that double, and it's not usually going to be the guy you left. Usually your
Yeah.
teammates going to take the guy you left and you're going to have to go find whoever their guy was. And Fred is just so intellectual the way he plays defense, where even if he doesn't get the dig, obviously he's so good at finding that open man, and that's what lets the Raptors play this really aggressive style. I have a question for you, real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll keep going player to player, but like I've seen so much talk about how the Raptors' defensive scheme has been figured out, how they should be less aggressive, doubling, superstars and sending a lot of help and bodies at people and basically leaving open sometimes role players to basically have these open threes. Um, the last 3 games, the Raptors have done that and had a lot of success. So my question would be, do you agree with that line of thinking that they do need to dial back the aggressiveness a little bit or what?
No, I'm personally totally okay with it. You look at the last few teams they've played. I mean, they've played two of maybe the most offensively gifted big men in the league, in Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid. You looked at the team, and Nick Nurse said early in the game, he basically alluded to the fact that he wasn't going to go small for this lineup. And it made sense because you look at a guy like Joel Embiid, if there's a game that Aaron Baines should have started, you would probably think it would be this one. They ended up going small. And immediately when you go small, back to what you were saying, you immediately think that OG's not going to be able to handle Joel Embiid on the low post, which is where Joel loves to operate. Joel's seen hundreds of double teams probably just this season alone, so he kind of knows what he's doing down there. But Toronto's okay with it. I think Nick Nurse has kind of came to this realization where he's just going to let other players beat him. If there's a game that if they lost this game, for example, and Seth Curry had a massive night, I mean, you're okay with that in the sense that you're not thinking, hey man, we let Joel Embiid have 35 and 20 on us, or Ben Simmons had a great game, by the way, as well. But Nick Nurse has made it clear that this is what he wants to do. You saw guys like Furkan Korkmaz for the Philadelphia 76ers. He was breaking everything. That guy couldn't buy a shot. Seth Curry was on and off. Shake Milton was coming back from injury. He was gone for 5 games. He didn't really look like Shake Milton, the Shake Milton that we're at least used to, who's a pretty gifted offensive guard, a guy who wasn't even he was an afterthought a couple of years ago, and now he's kind of turned into one of Philly's best scorers offensively. But Nick Nurse is okay with it, and I'm okay with it. I'm okay with the aggressiveness. I'm okay with Toronto as long as they have a guy like OG on the court for them to be flying at guys on the perimeter, and it has been working, and Toronto should be continuing with that. And it doesn't work without a guy like Pascal Siakam. And I want to get into Pascal real quick, Oren. He was comfortable in the first half. There's times, Oren, where I kind of look at Pascal and I'm like, pregame, I'm like, oh, he's going to have Ben Simmons on him most of the game. We're going to see a Pascal that's going to struggle a little bit. We're going to have to rely on Fred a little more. Pascal looked damn good in the first quarter, at least in the first half, at least. And that's a great sign when one of the NBA's best defenders in Ben Simmons is perched on you the majority of the game. I want to talk about one thing specifically with Pascal, Oren, where it seems like almost every time Nick Nurse uses him on ball screens as the actual screener, it works for Toronto, and especially on a team like this where Pascal was being used at the 5 and Embiid or Dwight Howard was trailing him. You had him picking and popping. You had him rolling to the hoop. Pascal looked good. What do you think about Pascal?
No, yeah, he's had a really good stretch here where I understand like the Pascal slander from people who don't watch the Raptors every day because he's not a sexy player, right? Like the way he scores and even the way he gets assists, it's not very sexy. And so and also he doesn't put up gaudy like numbers to the point where you're like, okay, he's definitely like a star. It's like him and Fred are both guys you need to really watch to kind of see where all of their value is coming from. Yeah. And then there is also that untapped potential, like him as a screener. I like it. I think he's gotten a little bit better. I think he's never liked being the screener, so it's hard to like say he should get more. It feels like he still slips too many screens, or just avoids them and kind of like relocates, thinking that he can catch the defense off guard, but he also has the ability to be a pretty good screener. Definitely has the ability to be a good rim runner too, because he has so much length and quickness. I was impressed, I think, most with Siakam. Like, he played 40 minutes, so that's a lot of a load to play on both ends of the floor. And he had 8 assists, 2 turnovers, and like the thing that's impressive about 8 assists, and I guess Siakam's overall season for me is like the feel it's dramatically improved. Like his ability to read the floor is dramatically improved. And when you have Simmons or Embiid draped over you, that's exactly what you should do. You should play make. You shouldn't try to go at Embiid and like score over him because he's probably the best defender in the world when he's locked in. So I like the way that he kind of took his opportunities when they came to him, especially early in the first half. But for the most part, just did a really good job finding relocators to get open for threes. Um, yeah, he was good. He was good.
He was good. He was really good. And Joel Embiid, I love how you mentioned him. And you said something very, very specific that I wanted to harp on, and that is when Joel Embiid's locked in, he might be the best defender, or at least from the front court in the entire league. That's one thing that I quickly jotted down today, where defensively for Joel, I felt like he was shading a lot towards Toronto guards, which is understandable when you have guys like Fred VanVleet coming downhill, when you have guys like DeAndre Bembry, who also I think had a very good game. I'm going to save him for later because he's in our wrap-up turning point of the game. But DeAndre Bembry and Fred VanVleet coming downhill, Joel Embiid shading a little bit towards them too much, and guys like Aaron Baines having free lanes to the hoop, Pascal Siakam having free lanes to the hoop. Joel Embiid, I mean, offensively, I felt like he was pretty passive in the first half. I was kind of wondering why Philly wasn't kind of giving him the ball as often. I mean, you had Ben Simmons rolling early. No one could really stop Ben Simmons. I mean, you had Siakam on him, but Nick Nurse kind of wanted Siakam to just hold that down for himself. He kind of wasn't really giving Siakam much help, which is okay. I mean, I'm okay with Pascal, who I think is an elite defender in his own right, kind of sticking on Ben Simmons. But it seemed like Joel Embiid specifically, throughout the game, he was kind of attempting a shot every few minutes. And I was kind of confused with that because they weren't really letting him get into that rhythm. Again, Nick Nurse was blitzing him all game with double teams, so maybe that had something to do with it. Do you think Joel Embiid, this game kind of hurt his stock? I mean, if you look at the box score, it looked pretty damn good. I mean, what center isn't averaging 15 or 16 rebounds on Toronto a game? Did you like Joel's game today specifically?
Yeah, I don't really think it hurt his stock. I think honestly the difference maker in the game was in the second half. Toronto's bench dramatically outplayed Philadelphia's bench and their role players. Like why Embiid didn't shoot, I think, is just because he was overwhelmed, I guess, in the sense that doubles every time he got the ball on the block, a double came. And so to him, he's not going to look to shoot when that's just what the Raptors are doing. He played pretty unselfishly, but at the same time, he does have room to grow as a playmaker in terms of making kind of like, instead of just the obvious read, I think he still needs to make more creative reads out of the post to help his teammates get extra threes. Because what I saw was him making the obvious read, I guess, and then them swinging the ball around to find the open man the time they did. Toronto did a really, really good job, and I'm going to get into this later on, of just rotating and closing out and keeping guys in front of them. But in terms of like his stock, so here's a stat, is that Embiid versus Toronto this season, he shot 35% from the field in 2 games, and Embiid versus every other team, he shot 55% from the field.
Hey.
So they're doing a really good job considering. I mean, we also got to give credit to Aaron Baines. I don't know if you want to take this one, your best friend Aaron Baines, but he played well, man. He
did.
Played well defensively, at least.
Yeah, he did play well defensively. And I said he did have some rolls to the rim, and I feel like Aaron Baines just has to make kind of do with what Fred VanVleet and Bembry are handing off to him near the rim. He had a couple of really good dunks, which I was kind of surprised because normally you don't try dunking on a guy like Joel Embiid. But Baines did look active defensively. But even with Baines on Embiid, Nick Nurse was still blitzing with double teams, which I agree with. I don't think you can kind of leave Baines on an island with Embiid. The size advantage is crazy. I mean, Baines is a big guy, but Joel Embiid's that guy's an absolute monster. So I was okay with that. Joel Embiid did shoot 6 for 20. But again, you look at the box score, 25 points, 17 rebounds. That in and of itself probably won't hurt his MVP stock. He did shoot 6 for 20, and that's what I was getting at. He had only 8 field goal attempts in the first half, and then he had 12 in the second half. So he wanted to be a little bit more aggressive. 14 free throws attempted in the game. A lot of those came in the second half. So he kind of switched up his mentality there in the second half.
So can
And
I go back real quick? I'm going to go back to the aggressive defense. And I think one thing that's worth noting is that it kind of puts like stars out of their comfort zone. And so Embiid taking those extra shots, even when he hasn't been scoring, is exactly, I guess, what, the Raptors want. He's no longer making the right basketball decision every time. He's maybe, instead of passing it out to a, Seth Curry or a Danny Green open three, he's just going to try to take it up around bodies himself. And that's what we saw a lot in the second half. Danny Green, by the way, not great.
No, not good at all.
But that's I guess why I agree with you in terms of the aggressive defense. I like it. Maybe you can scale it back a bit, but it's more so working within it, improving within it, because late game and in the playoffs, that's when you get the most benefit out of that kind of thing, because guys are thinking differently and they're not comfortable.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Danny Green. I'm not even going to really get into Danny Green, but I think for the 76ers, it's kind of been a tale of the tape for issues that they've had for a very long time, their lack of depth. You look at the 76ers starting five when they're all healthy, it's one of the best in the league, bar none. Like this is a team that's 20 wins, 11 losses. Toronto's over 500 now, but they're at the top of the Eastern Conference for a reason. Like this team starting five is absolutely incredible. Tobias Harris didn't have a really good shooting night, but you look at what's after that starting five, and even tonight, I mean, Shake Milton was a minus 24. Matisse Thybulle, he is an absolute elite defender, but he gives you nothing, Oren, offensively. He was a minus 23. 76ers just really didn't shoot well at all from the field, save for Ben Simmons, who was 9 for 11 from the field. Seth Curry is 4 for 12. Thybulle only shot one shot. He was 0 for 1. Korkmaz was 0 for 2. This was maybe one of the better defensive games, I think, for Toronto as a whole.
For sure, agreed. Yeah. So I'll get into that when I get into the clips. I think we'll talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, do you want to hit maybe Boucher before we get to the turning point?
Yes, absolutely. So Chris Boucher, goodness gracious, Chris Boucher, like if there's a definition, Oren, a textbook definition for a game changer, that was Chris Boucher tonight. He was not missing from three-point land tonight. He had some huge offensive rebounds late in the game. And that's the thing with Chris Boucher. Like, he's not just affecting the game in one aspect. He's hitting from when he's on, he's hitting from three. He's getting you those offensive rebounds. He's active on the glass. He had a massive chase down block on Joel Embiid. He was maybe 10 feet behind him to start the play, runs after him, chase down, huge block. Again, like I said, those blocks were kind of altering the way Philly was attacking. Late in the game, they weren't really attacking the rim as much, which is what they had so much success with, early in the game. Embiid was firing constantly from three. Seth Curry, Shake Milton, these guys were all shooting a bunch of shots. And obviously that's not just Chris Boucher. A lot of that just had to do with Toronto being so aggressive defensively. But Chris Boucher, man, I'm so proud that this guy's Canadian. He had a hunger tonight that just single-handedly lifted Toronto up. In terms of, maximizing his minutes on the court, I think he was probably the best player on the court, just in terms of what his role was. What did you think about Chris Boucher? Because I am absolutely elated with how he played tonight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He was definitely the difference maker. It was a tale of two halves where the 76ers had a better first half because, like I said, their role players were giving them stuff, or their bench, and Toronto's bench gave them nothing in the first half. And then Boucher just came in and started knocking down, I think, a career high, made threes. He spaced the floor, pulling Joel out there, especially when Baines wasn't in the game, so that the Raptors had a little bit easier time getting to the basket because Joel had to guard him. He played Dwight Howard off the floor completely. They went small when Joel was sitting because Dwight couldn't stand the pick and pop game. Dwight just couldn't rotate quick enough, so they just stopped playing Dwight, which I thought was pretty significant. Like, the Raptors started small, but they ended up playing really big with Baines, Boucher, and Siakam, right, for most of the fourth. And that lineup, like you just said, it's hard to score inside against when you have like two real rim protectors in Boucher and Siakam, and then Baines, who's positionally really sound against a guy like Embiid. They were living and dying by the three, and they eventually died, the 76ers. So yeah, Boucher, he deserves a lot of credit. Like he also had this one stretch where it was late in the fourth. He went up straight to contest like a layup at the rim. They missed it. They got the offensive rebound, kicked it up to a corner three. And he just had like a picture perfect closeout where he ran by the guy, but still got his hands right in his eyes. And I'm just like, this guy has come such a long way. Like,
Yeah, and you know what, Oren? If you actually play basketball, that's a skill. Like to close out on a guy and to not hit him or to not tackle him. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like a very easy thing not to do. But when you're really closing out in the heat of the game on a guy, for Chris Boucher to constantly do this and alter shots, he sometimes he's not even blocking these shots. You said like he had the hand in the face, and when Chris Boucher's arm, which is like that fantastic forearm, that thing doesn't really end. Chris Boucher's length is crazy. He jumps at you. I mean, he's altering that shot 100%, and he did that in this game a couple times. He had one on Korkmaz as well where he blocked the shot. I personally, Oren, because we're on the Chris Boucher topic, I want to get into the wrap-up turning point of the game, which was Chris Boucher. A very simple play, actually, when you really look back at it, but it was the turning point for sure. This was Chris Boucher, a classic, pick and pop between Chris Boucher and DeAndre Bembry. This was, again, another play that highlights Bembry's ability all season to kind of make these, terrific momentum passes, getting guys in momentum into shots or rolling to the rim. Chris Boucher catches it, lets it fly, ties up the game for Toronto at 89. Toronto never really looked back for the rest of that game. From that moment on, they scored 21 points while only allowing 14 for the rest of the fourth quarter. And again, that was the turning point because that specific play, Oren, was the beginning of an absolute three-point barrage by Chris Boucher. Again, as well as, like I mentioned earlier, that big trailing block on him. That was the wrap-up turning point of the game for me. I know you wanted to get into some clips as well.
Yeah, I'm waiting for our producer to play the clip of the turning point. But oh, here we go. Here we go. Just so we can watch this together as a family.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely a nice bounce pass there. And it's really nice
Beautiful.
to have Bembry off the bench in a role like this where he was the only real point guard on the floor. Like you had Siakam, who's a point forward, and Davis, who's not a point guard.
Definitely not.
So he's the on-ball guy, and it's really nice, especially when Lowry was out, to have that, and they didn't even play Malachi today. So yeah, like we'll get into this clip I want to show to highlight the Raptors' improved defense. I thought this was probably their best defensive game that they played all season, maybe. And like I said earlier, in terms of like the aggressiveness, I don't think it's that the Raptors need to change their scheme or play like a drop or something. I don't think that's the way to go. And more importantly than what I think, I don't think that's not what Nick Nurse has wanted to play since he became Raptors head coach. He's always like that aggressive defense. So this clip is a good example in just like small waves they've improved in terms of their closeouts. They're no longer running past guys on the closeout for the most part. They're just getting in front of them. And there you see the perfect example of a guy like Seth Curry, who's the one guy you want to really run off the line. Fred runs him off the line. Everyone else, they're just getting in front of because they're not elite shooters. They just want to get in front of and make sure that they shoot a contested shot, but not let them blow by them. So yeah, the Raptors rotations all game were really good. This is in the first quarter, but I thought it only improved as the game went on. And in the fourth quarter, that's really when their rotations like picked up some speed, and Philly just could not generate good looks for the most part.
No, for sure. And that's where the game changed, for sure. Like that's exactly where the game flipped for Toronto and for Philly. I mean, Philly had two big leads in this game, early on in the game and in the third quarter. Third quarter is when I started panicking myself, Warren, because I was like, you know what, Philly looks like they have some good momentum going to start the quarter. Whatever halftime adjustments they made, I don't even honestly know if they made halftime adjustments. It looked like they were just hitting shots. Like Tobias Harris was coming off screens, hitting shots. Shake hit a couple shots for the 76ers. Seth Curry hit a three. And before they knew it, it was an 11-0 run, for Philadelphia. And then Toronto started clawing back late in the game, or late in the third quarter, I should say. Chris Boucher, like I said, earns are the wrap-up turning point of the game. I wanted to talk about a couple more players, Oren. Norman Powell we always get into because he has just been supernova, the last month or two for Toronto. But today, he finally had, an off kind of game. I mean, he was 3 for 11. He played 26 minutes. This is the first game, I think, in a while where he didn't play over 30 minutes. He was 3 for 11. I think a lot of that had to do with Bembry eating into his minutes, Terrence Davis eating into his minutes. Norm Powell, when you look at the plus minuses across the board, he was a minus 26. So, and the next closest guy was a -5, and that was Matt Thomas, who was on the court for like a blink of an eye. What did you think about Norman Powell? Did you just think this was just due to come for him? I mean, he's been offensively maybe the Raptors' best player in the last month, or at least most consistent player. Were you okay with how Norm played? It was just a down-to-earth type thing. Am I looking too much into it? What is it, Oren?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just an off game from him. I think he should pick up his scoring where he left it off. But I think it kind of showed you that like he's not maybe as important as people think, in the sense that, there's guys who can replicate some of the things he does in terms of coming off pin downs, in terms of being spot up options, in terms of attacking closeouts. Like, don't get me wrong, Norm's elite at all of that stuff, and no one else on the roster really is. But there's guys like Bembry and Davis who give you a little bit of that pop that Norm gives you. And like, I feel like I've been pretty reserved with like my Norm takes, but to be really honest with you, I know you disagree, but to be honest, like, I've always been in the trade Norm camp. I don't think he's worth that, whatever he's going to make this offseason, in the sense that, he plays like Robel and Samson had a really good podcast in the Raptors Republic feed about this. And Robel made the point that, Powell thrives playing next to the starters for sure. They help him so much and he scores because of it. But how much is he helping them? Like, they help him a lot to score, but how much is he helping them other than obviously providing a scoring punch? I just think like it's such a good asset that you're not going to have in the future. And like, the small ball lineup is really good. So I get why people are hesitant to want to trade him. And I still think that's their best lineup. But like, what if you trade him and you don't even get a big, you get a wing who's a better fit with that lineup? Because your two guards are 6 feet. Norm is not the ideal 3 in that lineup, I think. So I just think you could get someone maybe a little bit more ideal going forward for that lineup. But that's that's all I'll say on Norm.
Yeah, for sure. We have a live commenter, Chris Willis, who said in the comments that, Norm maybe is just more fit for a 6-man role for Toronto. I mean, he's done really well as a starter, so you can't really say that he can't, produce as a starter. But in terms of, overall team balance, Oren, I'm going to ask you again a quick question. Do you just think Norm's just better coming off the bench, or do you just think Nick Nurse should kind of just keep this amoeba lineup going, where he's just substituting Chris Boucher into the starting lineup, Norm Powell, DeAndre Bembry, all these guys? It seems like Pascal and Fred and maybe Anunoby when he's healthy are the only kind of mainstays in the lineup, and then the other 2 spots are just a rotational, throw this guy in there, throw that guy in there. Yeah. Do you think Norm should kind of just hold down that 6th-man or that 7th-man, I guess, spot with Chris Boucher and go from there? Or do you think, it's more of a kind of matchup thing for Nick Nurse and the Toronto Raptors?
No, I like him. I like him coming off the bench. And I'll go back to Rebel here because he made a good point on that podcast. And he just said, like, Norm isn't better than Fred, Kyle, OG, or Siakam. He's not better than any of those players. So, and you can't start small throughout an 82 game season. Like, you can't start small every game. You need a big man, or else you're just shaving years off like OG's, nice career he has going for him. So I still think ideally they get a center in the starting lineup, and Norm moves to the bench. Yeah. What do you think about so Blake Murphy tweeted out that in this game, Baines and Boucher together were plus 25 and 14 minutes. On the season, they're plus 49 and 46 minutes. So they've worked, at least the numbers say, really well, those two at the 4 or 5. What have you seen from them?
Yeah, I personally, like, when you look at, it feels like Nick Nurse has kind of mixed up this lineup so much, where you'll see a Boucher and a Baines and a Anunoby and an Anunoby and a Siakam. You've seen so many different lineups where I'm not surprised that people are looking at, the plus minus category for a lot of these combinations. I think it's still a little bit early to kind of look at this team and say, you know what, this guy's a plus, these two are a plus 30 together. You don't want to draw too much. But again, Chris Boucher works with Aaron Baines because Aaron Baines kind of gravitates towards the rim naturally on pick and rolls. His ability to shoot the basketball on pick and pops still hasn't really been there this season. I personally, I hold my breath when Aaron Baines is shooting the basketball. And this is a guy who shot really well with the Phoenix Suns last year. So he was supposed to kind of be that stretch 5 for Toronto, who we could throw on bigger guys like Joel Embiid. But Chris Boucher, he's so good with his positional awareness. And that's probably why that this is working so well, because Chris Boucher knows that, hey, if Baines is here, I'm there. Baines is on the inside. The Toronto Raptors, I think, work best with at least 4 guys on the perimeter and 1 guy maybe rolling in and out of the hoop or staying near that paint area. I personally think it works well because of Chris Boucher, not necessarily because of Baines. A lot of people think I'm that Baines kind of grim reaper when it comes to the big man down low. But, I'll give Baines his flowers. Again, like you said, this game he played really well, at least defensively. Offensively, he had some really good rolls to the rim, like we said earlier. I'm okay with the Boucher-Baines kind of together lineup. But again, it's not enough for me to go, you know what, Oren? Let's start these two together and see where we can go from there. I'm not doing all of that.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Plus minus numbers. I kind of hate how much they're used in small sample sizes, especially because there's too many other factors to just say
exactly
this is this. But in terms of because they have really been playing against bench units, that's pretty elite when it comes to a 4 or 5 playing bench units, right? I don't know if they would be that effective because they're not perfect players, but I do think the fit is really good. Both of them cover up for things that the other one is not good at. So in terms of Baines, he's not a great rim protector. Boucher will come over and he'll provide that weak side help. And the other thing Boucher does is stretches the floor. And like you said, I also hold my breath when he shoots threes. It looks terrible, and it is terrible. They don't go down at all this season. So playing beside Boucher, I think Baines doesn't have to be that floor spacer as much as he does when he plays in other lineups. So yeah.
I wanted to talk about Fred one more time. Like I said, he started off the game really, really hot in the first quarter, but I think Fred's maybe best moments came in this game again were him being passive, which sounds very weird again, but him kind of handing off those duties to DeAndre Bembry and just being that floor spacer that Toronto needs. I mean, when Toronto has Fred on the court, they personally, what I think, is one of the best, standstill 3-point shooters in the league. I mean, Fred standing still waiting for that ball is incredible. And Fred has really worked on his game where that off the screen 3 where teams keep going high. And I don't understand this with teams and Fred VanVleet where they just keep going high on these screens. And Fred's just like, all right, you're going to go high and you're going to go trail me from behind. I'm just going to pull up. And he's done it so many times. Pull-up 3 has been incredible this year. Fred VanVleet, to me, is one of the best players in this game, for me at least. He played 38 minutes. He played a huge role. He's 5 for 10 from 3, 7 for 15 from the floor. This is good to see from Fred coming off of a game where he went 4 for 20. He had 23 points. He was seeing the court so well, Oren. 9 assists. He had 5 rebounds. And again, for a guy like Fred to have 5 rebounds, I mean, 5 rebounds in the grand scheme of things isn't a big thing to go crazy about. But Fred's like 5'9". You know what I mean? So I mean, I'm happy for Fred. He was again, like I said, he had 23 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds. He played really well in this game.
Yeah,
I mean, overall, what did you? I was gonna ask, what did you think about Fred?
Yeah, we touched on him in the beginning, but
Yeah.
So he's been killing the drops against first
Drop coverage
Milwaukee.
doesn't work, it just doesn't work versus a guy like Fred. I mean, we saw
Exactly.
enough in the Dwayne Casey years with Jonas Valanciunas. Jonas Valanciunas getting planked down low and just waiting for guys to come into the paint. And Toronto had their fair share of games where they were getting destroyed by the 3 at the top of the key or by the mid-range, with Jonas just waiting for teams. And like you said, it's a totally different defensive system with Nick Nurse kind of, taking advantage of teams doing that now, that drop coverage, and giving Fred that green light, which I'm personally happy about. I don't know about you. Did you want to add anything else on Fred?
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy that about Nick Nurse for sure, because I feel like, I'm sure if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan, you're holding your head every time Brook Lopez drops and Dame or Fred or whoever it is, one of these elite pick and roll shooters, just kills you in the drop game after game after game. I'm so glad the Raptors don't do that. And yeah, Fred has now shown it against the Bucks 2 games in a row, and now against the Sixers. You can't really drop against him. He's so lethal as a pull-up shooter. Honestly, this year it's been a big improvement in his game, and it's something that should just keep getting better. And then on top of that, Blake Murphy made the point on Twitter that I thought was a good one, that both Siakam and Fred have really improved the holes in their game that hurt them in that Sixers series 2 years ago, when they basically leaned on Kawhi to do everything because no one else was doing well offensively. Kyle, okay, but the rest of them really weren't. Fred was living and dying by the 3 and couldn't really get it off against such a big team, so he's extended his 3-point range. He did that last year, and now he's also added the mid-range and gotten a little better at getting to the rim, at least frequency-wise.
Yeah.
Siakam has added the mid-range, and it's not talked about enough, but him adding that makes him a lot harder to defend. And then the other thing he's done is just become such a much better playmaker. Again, 8 assists today, that he really just took apart the 76ers, who have one of the best defenses in the league. He just saw what they were doing, read it at a quick enough speed, and was the Raptors' best playmaker tonight for me. So that's impressive on both of their ends.
Yeah, for sure. Fred's a guy who's averaged 6.5 assists the last 2 seasons, so you can't really say he's been a bad playmaker this last 2 seasons. Now, again, I don't want to base it just off of assist numbers. Fred's just seeing the floor a lot better, especially I think on pick and rolls. Pick and roll Fred was very kind of one-dimensional last season, I want to say, and a lot of the season before that. They didn't even run it a lot for him because I think Nick Nurse just knew that this guy isn't really seeing the floor all that well. Ben, in the live comments, because, Oren, I wanted to make it a point to get to these live comments a little more. We have, a growing live comment section now. Ben S. Ben S. says, Kyle's not going to play forever. We won't have 2 6-foot guards forever. Any moves being made have to keep that in mind. He said Norm's a keeper, and he'll be a 2 for us full-time once Kyle retires or just decides to leave. I know you said you're part of that trade Norm camp, but I want to get into, again, I don't want to go too far from the game. I feel like we've talked about it quite a bit now, but do you want to address Ben's comment about him kind of thinking that Norm and Fred are kind of the contingency plan once Kyle leaves the Toronto Raptors?
Yeah, I hear you. I disagree. I don't think he's necessarily the 2 of the future, but we'll see. I get why people want him to stay long term. It's been great to watch his progression as a scorer. And what he's giving the Raptors is very important to them winning this season. But also the idea that Kyle is definitely gone. I touched on this last week. I don't know. I would definitely prioritize Kyle if there's a choice between those two, you know. And in a way there is because you only have so much cap space. If you want to re-sign Kyle, it's going to cost maybe 20 million in that range. And after that, you're running out of space and you really got to decide, okay, is Norm the best use of our resources? Which is why I'm not part of this trade Norm thing because I don't like him as a player. It's because this is a guard heavy team who has a lot of the things he does, who has literally zero centers and not very many wing players. The wing depth is
Yeah.
really bad. So I would rather improve those two areas of the roster than the guards.
Yeah, for sure. And now that you're mentioning improving the roster, I want to get into Oren. You knew this was coming. Come on now. The best segment, of this post game live show, it is you're the GM, right? And the GM and the president, I believe, as well.
The Sixers, right?
The Sixers,
Okay.
I believe, is Daryl Morey.
It is.
But now that's Oren Weisfeld. So we're gonna get into
it.
this. So I'm gonna ask you because I wanted to just quickly mention that when James Harden was on that trade market, I felt like the Philadelphia 76ers should have attacked it completely, even if it meant putting Ben Simmons out there for Houston to take. And I think that's a pretty good deal for Houston to take, considering what they ended up getting back for James Harden. Really just Victor Oladipo, who doesn't really even seem like he's going to stay, and picks as well. You're the 76ers GM, president, whatever title you want to use. Do you like the direction that Philly's kind of taking at this point? Do you think that the ceiling of this team is to reach the finals, or are they missing something? Are we going to see that same old Philadelphia team that gets to the second round and kind of just fizzles out when they run into a Boston or Miami or Toronto? Are you okay with the moves they made, the Seth Currys and all that stuff, the shooters that they put around Embiid and Simmons? What do you think the ceiling of your team is?
Yeah. So I agree with you on the Harden point. I thought they should have done whatever they could to get him, including Simmons, because he's James Harden and he would fit really well with Joel Embiid. I think that would just be a lethal 1-2. But anyways, they didn't get him. So in terms of the ceiling, yeah, maybe it is a finals team in terms of their absolute ceiling. I think the East is not the strongest it's been at the top this year. So I could see them going to the finals at the very best and then getting demolished by the Lakers.
Whack. Yeah.
That's where I would say their ceiling is. But like at the same time, I don't believe in them at this stage because I still just don't think after Embiid, who I do think is the MVP this season, just because out of all the guys you look at in that conversation, he's the only one doing it on both ends to the same extent, where he's just as important on the defensive end as he is offensively. Other than Embiid, I just don't think there's enough top-end talent. Like, Harris is nice, okay. Simmons, I think, is a little overrated, honestly. Like, I get the defense. He really is one of the best defenders in the league. But after that, I don't know if he could be your second best player on a championship team. So really, I'm just wait and see kind of mode. Like, finally, Daryl Morey, put shooters around these guys, and it's working. At least in the regular season, it's really working. So let's see it out. Maybe they add another piece at the deadline in the front court and just see, or a guard, honestly, and just see if it works with shooters. But if it doesn't and they get bounced in the playoffs again, then I think you really got to decide, okay, is Ben Simmons part of the future of this team? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, and Ben Simmons, don't get us wrong. Ben Simmons is a great player in his own right. Again, like I said earlier in the live post-game show, he's one of the best defenders in the league. He said himself, I believe I'm the best defender in the league. And I'm okay with a guy like him saying that. He's what I think is an all-star. You can't really be at the top of the East for Philadelphia and not have two all-stars. Embiid's probably the clearest all-star there is, other than guys like LeBron, and some other guys, but some other starters. But I think you have to have Ben Simmons in the all-star game. We've talked enough about the Philadelphia side of things, the Toronto side of things. We went through so many players. We went through the wrap-up. We went through clips that we diagnosed for you guys tonight. So we're going to end it off here. Fortunately for me and Oren, we're not going to see you guys tomorrow. We're going to see you guys the day after on Wednesday. And again, it's versus Philadelphia. I wanted to quickly quote the legendary Jack Armstrong. He said the Raptors started 2-8, and for all of you people who jumped off the wagon, shame on you. This was the wrap-up, guys. Your Raptors Republic post-game live show, where your Toronto Raptors came up with a huge win versus the Philadelphia 76ers, 110-103. Don't forget to like. Thank you to all of the comments. We're going to keep getting to the live comments as this show keeps going. I am your co-host, Sahal Abdi, and again here with Oren Weisfeld. Thanks for staying with us. Again, we'll see you on Tuesday versus Philadelphia.